reminder of our top story this hour. The focus of the Hong Kong protests shifts to China. Social media platforms accusing Beijing of orchestrating a campaign of misinformation. China did not respond to the allegations of Facebook and Twitter head-on, but its foreign ministry defended the right of the Chinese people and media to make their voices heard over the Hong Kong protests. Meanwhile, Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam promises action, a government dialogue platform with people of all backgrounds, and a police watchdog task force to handle police complaints. Now, for more on our top story, we're joined by Andrew Shuen, Research Director at the Lion Rock Institute in Hong Kong. Andrew, what do you think of Carrie Lam's olive branch, if you like, of dialogue and the IPCC investigation? More of the same rhetoric, or a concrete step perhaps forward to help resolve the political crisis?
It is a concrete step, but I'm afraid that it is insufficient because the IPCC, which is the Independent Police Complaint Commission, has, like so many other institutions in Hong Kong since the handover, had its credibility completely destroyed by poor appointments. A lot of people view that the individuals in the commission are mere lackeys of the administration, and therefore, even if they were to conduct an investigation, it would not be fair or thorough. So therefore, the people of Hong Kong still continues to demand an independent commission chaired by a respected judge.
It is an appropriate step, however insufficient. Do you think any trust could have been created between this move, and if not, these gestures not enough to satisfy protesters, then what can be done?
Well, the demand from Beijing has always been to cease the violence. And over the weekend, you saw that the violence has stopped. This has been a weekend where no tear gas has been fired. So at least Beijing's stance, or the people of Hong Kong has fulfilled what Beijing wanted. But the demand for independent investigation still stands. According to the latest poll, 80% of Hong Kong people, and 80%, of course, would encompass both those who are so-called yellow ribbons and those who are pro-establishment as well, wanting an independent investigation into the matter. In fact, you already see members of the Executive Council, which has collective, sort of like a cabinet for the chief executive. Members within it has already called for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to look into the affair so as to start to heal the division within Hong Kong society.
Andrew, it's been a week since protests were violent, protest violence hit its peak, if you like, at the airport. But since then, protests have been largely peaceful, as you alluded to over the weekend. Why the sudden shift?
Well, I think the two most important factors were the protesters. Actually, I think the entire Hong Kong, if you actually look at social media, felt that the actions at the airport stepped over the line. The people always believed that, yes, you can harass the police, perhaps even attack government property, but the actions at the airport began to harass even ordinary passengers. So there was a consensus that maybe the steps was taken has been too far, and therefore we're ceding the moral high ground. But perhaps even more importantly, in the early hours on Thursday morning in Hong Kong last week, there were two individuals from mainland China, actually, according to their identification papers, caught in Hong Kong carrying Molotov cocktails. So the more violent protesters in Hong Kong feel that they are now agents provocateurs infiltrating the movement, and therefore any violence could be instigated by Beijing or by the mainlanders, and therefore the more violent section of the protesters believe that, well, then it's time to not take a step forward in violence and not let those plans succeed if the mainlanders were to become violent themselves and pin the blame on Hong Kong protesters. So I think that was a very important one. And then also over the weekend, the protest was supposed to be a rally, and any movement, when the rally becomes a march, technically is actually an illegal act. So more than 1 million people actually technically committed an illegal act, but albeit peacefully. So the people of Hong Kong are still venting their frustration through protests and marches, and perhaps even doing it illegally, but fulfilling the demand by Beijing to cease violence. So I don't know if it was an intentional move by perhaps the mainland authorities to plant the idea of agent provocateur within the people of Hong Kong, or whether it was a genuine move by a rogue unit within the Beijing administration to send individuals to Hong Kong to masquerade as protesters and throw petrol bombs. But whatever it was, it worked, and the violence has ceased.
Andrew, I want to get your, your point of view on this. What do you make of the allegations that, Beijing is actually using social media to delegitimize the protest movement?
Well, I mean, the same moves has been done in U.S. elections and the UK Brexit referendum. So to sway public opinion nowadays, you have to be on social media. The simple statistics is that traditional media in Hong Kong's, the ratings, whether it was television stations or the readership of newspapers, have been falling dramatically over the last decade. And therefore, if you want a message spread across in Hong Kong, you have to go onto social media, which of course is unregulated. But then Hong Kong people, after all, we are all individuals of the world-class trading port, and if you were to become a successful trader, the integrity of information has to be very strong, or at least your cynicism towards fake information also has to be very strong. So their attempts, I can understand, but their effectiveness, I doubt very much. But unfortunately, the biggest problem is that Hong Kong, being an international city, has a lot of interfaces with the international scene, and therefore their efforts, which to them could seem like a local Chinese city effort, a sort of a within intra-country, intranational effort, would then have an effect on international organizations. Whether it is a local mainland-funded newspaper going after a U.S. State Department employee and revealing all her personal information, or whether it's move on Twitter or Facebook, planting ads or fake information within them. So I think the Beijing authorities are having a big lesson in how to deal with a society in which there is a free flow of information and trying to maintain political control over it.
Well, speaking of sort of Beijing's approach to the protests in Hong Kong, it does seem like they are perhaps turning to a softer line. An example of this perhaps would be, announcing plans for Shenzhen that Hong Kong could be overtaken by its neighboring city.
Well, the deadline, at least within the people of Hong Kong, the deadline to make Hong Kong peaceful and calm again is October 1st this year, because this is when the People's Republic of China celebrates its 70th year of establishment. And the Beijing authorities don't want to see foreign news media covering their celebration in a split-screen format. On the left side would be a parade in Tiananmen Square, and on the right side would be massive marches on Nathan Road in Hong Kong. So we all know that there's a time limit to this. And as for the document saying that they want to create a special administrative region, say in Shenzhen, to be more Hong Kong than Hong Kong, then the people of Hong Kong actually today, for the last few hours, had a very widespread discussion on social media. Does this mean that that Shenzhen will have a complete free flow of information? Would Facebook and Google be finally able to challenge Tencent and Baidu? Would they have a rule of law? I mean, rule of law in the tangible sense. In Hong Kong, if the tax authorities was to send you a tax bill in which you disagree with, you can seek judicial review and have an expectation of winning. But in Shenzhen, if the tax authorities were to send you a tax bill, do you have a legitimate expectation of winning? So unless they can create these kind of scenarios and environments, it's very hard for them to replicate something to overtake Hong Kong. But if they do, then the people of Hong Kong would surely welcome that too, because that means that the best things about Hong Kong is being copied in China. I mean, Hong Kong at one time was the world's biggest toys manufacturer. It was the biggest cotton spinning base of the world, and these things disappeared into China through Shenzhen, and we have no problems with Shenzhen copying our best techniques. And perhaps if this document is true, which Hong Kong people suspect is drafted by the more pragmatic, dovish reformist within the Xi administration. That means that the Hong Kong people's dream of having China adopt our policy, if there is an end to one country, two systems, it is because their system finally copied ours and not ours converging to theirs.
Yeah, certainly an interesting way to look at things. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, Andrew Shuen, Research Director at the Lion Rock Institute.